So hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Stephanie Bennett, and I am the president of SNCA, here to welcome you to our 40th annual meeting. By the end of the meeting, you may be very sick of the number 40, but for now, it's pretty cool. Everybody loves a birthday party, right? I will be brief in my remarks, but I do have some things that I would like to share. This meeting has been the vision of Vice President Josh Hager from the State Archives. And also it's in thanks to many, many, many people on committees, the board members. Josh will be thanking people by name, but I just want you to know that sitting next to you is someone who's contributing in some way to this meeting. If you yourself aren't, you probably are. You're here right now. So thank you to everyone for sharing your strengths and insights with all the archivists and archives workers around you. As archives workers in North Carolina, we need investment, encouragement, and support. And in SNCA, we can find that. We can be that for each other. I value SNCA because it is a way for people to come together and find and share encouragement, education, networks of support. We are here as people, and we're also here as archives workers. And it's really nice to be among archivists. As we see today, our individual contributions amassed quite a feast. Presentations and posters, a little bit of socializing, shared ideas that need time and help to germinate. These are at the center of everything. There are 1,000 scenarios where conversation can provide solace, assistance, wisdom, fun. Josh and I were just making a little joke about the prevalence of liquor boxes. What would we do if prohibition had stuck? We would never get any records. Today and every time we're together, consider the strengths that you have to share and ask the questions that you need help answering. Tell the jokes that are at the top of your mind. If I can be of assistance personally, I'm always available on Mark Zuckerberg's internet. SNCA has existed for 40 years. Long may it last, as long as the archives workers of North Carolina need us, as long as we need each other. Thank you for being here. And Josh, I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the State Archives of North Carolina, back where it all began in 1983, 1984, both. I'll go over that a little bit when we get to our panel. First, a little bit of housekeeping. I would like to thank our sponsors for the 2024 annual meeting, the ECU College of Education and Library Science, Patterson Pope, Hollinger Metal Edge, University Products, Archival Methods, and Z. Smith Reynolds Library at Wake Forest University. We give them a round of applause for their generous support. I would now like to thank the committees that have made this event specifically possible. First, the programming committee, and if you are able, please stand so we can recognize you for your service. Patrick Cash from East Carolina, Alston Coburn from East Carolina, Kathleen McCarty Smith from UNC Greensboro, not here just yet. Rebecca from Wake Forest, and Barry Weiss from Ronaldo House. Our local arrangements team consisted of Francesca Evans, who's probably outside. Most of these people are going to be outside helping. Aaron Gallagher, back in the back. Dominique Romero, and Taylor and Colin Reeve, all of those from the State Archives in North Carolina. There's Colin. And Taylor Walford from NC State University. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You saw the email I sent out earlier this week about navigating our building. It's not the typical kind of conference setting. So most of the sessions that are the plenaries and the business meeting are all in here, and the A sessions are all in here. The B sessions are in room 308. The way to access that is the elevator on this side. Elevator on that side is out of service. So the elevator on this side of the building, or going up the stairs. If you go up the stairs, you're going to go into the M floor first before you get to 2. So don't accidentally get off on 2 thinking you're at 3. If you get off at 2, you'll see a lot of construction going on. Which leads me to my second point. There is active construction going on today upstairs. So if you are having a session in room 308, you may hear some drilling, and I apologize. We didn't know that was going to be happening when we planned this. Please be as loud as you possibly can. There's nothing else we can do about it. So I thank you for your considerations, and I apologize in advance if that interrupts your presentation. You'll also see in room 308, there's a large conference table that we could not move in the center of the room, but we still have the room set up for more than 40 people. But please be accommodating and make sure you have a seat if you can. If the room is overfull, if you wouldn't mind coming back down to the session and down here in the auditorium, I'd appreciate it. The restrooms are on either side of the lobby. Men's rooms over here, women's rooms over here. There's also some restrooms in the corner, and there's restrooms on every floor of the building as well, down one floor on the basement, and there's also restrooms in the middle of the floor on the third floor. And if you have any other questions about logistics, find anyone who's on local arrangements, and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. I should have one other note because we won't all be together again before this happens. When lunch starts, it'll be from your respective sessions. Lunch will be served at the same place you picked up your breakfast over here on this side. And then we ask that you take your lunch to one of the locations that I mentioned in the email. Behind our building is lovely Freedom Park. I would encourage you to have lunch outside today al fresco. It is a beautiful setting and should have plenty of space for us. But if you want to eat inside, you can take your food up to the third floor in room 308. And there's 2 tables over here to the side if you want to use those, and they're open. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our first speaker before we get to the panel, the State Archivist, Sarah Kuntz, to tell us a little bit about America 250. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Josh, and thank you to everyone on the program committee and local arrangements for making this meeting happen. And I'll offer my own apologies. I'm always apologizing for this building, but it's always freezing in here, so you might want to make sure you have a sweater. All right, as Josh said, my name is Sarah Kuntz. It's my pleasure to serve as the State Archivist of North Carolina. I will date myself, but I remember SNCA's 10-year anniversary when I first started. So I have been around in the archives profession for quite a while, and it's been my honor to serve with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Our secretary, Reed Wilson, likes to say that our department contains everything from A to Z that people love about North Carolina and what brings us together. And so with that at A to Z, I always start with the first A, which is the archives, and then archives to the zoo and everything in between. So you'll find lots of great things all across the state. We manage over 100 locations. And so we're in all things cultural and natural heritage in the state. So today, Josh asked me to give you a few brief remarks about the America 250 commemoration and how archives can get involved. I'm actually leading the statewide planning efforts through DNCR. And so this is what I spend a lot of my time on, is thinking about America 250 and how to connect it to the people of the state of North Carolina. So for those of you that are a little bit unfamiliar and you're like, what is this America 250? It is the commemoration of the founding of the country with the Declaration of Independence. So nationally, that high watermark will be in 2026. Nearly every state, and I think pretty soon it will be every state, has a committee or body or commission or somebody leading that effort. And through our agency, because we are that kind of omnibus, unique natural and cultural entity, the governor had asked us to lead the planning for North Carolina. There's also a national commission that's at work, and federal agencies are working to support the commemoration programming and resources through their channels as well. But let me start first with a little conversation about archives and what I like to shorten it as the semi-quin at a high level. So for several years, I've had the pleasure of being involved with a group of archivists representing the Society of American Archivists, the Council of State Archivists, the National Association of Government Archives and Records Administrators, and the Regional Archival Associations Consortium. So members of this group are selected by their respective associations, and we collaborate on issues of advocacy for archives across the country. So we develop advocacy training and opportunities at the federal level, including Archives on the Hill advocacy days, which we've done in advance of some joint annual meetings in Washington, D.C. We create shared position statements on issues of archives and records in the news, and we partner with other cultural heritage organizations to promote increased funding for archives. So this group recently issued a statement called Archivists and America's 250th Commemoration. I'm going to read you a couple excerpts here. The semi-quincentennial of the United States of America provides a unique opportunity to reflect on the origins of our democratic republic and recognize the evolution of our country from its origins to the present day. Entrusted with the collection and preservation of the historical record, archival institutions seek to support commemorations of the creation of the United States, reflections on how the creation of the United States has responded to societal, environmental, political, and economic change, as well as how the state has become an agent of that change, and explorations of our history as a society of diverse communities who have worked to create a more perfect union. The records and documents we hold are written by those who were present at the time of change, reflecting their thinking and reasoning for continuing to move the experiment of our democracy forward. Our democratic republic was initiated by the drafting of the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and fully formed with the adoption of the Constitution in 1789. And since that time, our country has evolved in every way imaginable. Our population has grown to be the most diverse in the world. We have established and eliminated institutions that have changed business, society, and the planet itself. We have developed the land that forms our country and sought ways to protect it for future generations. We have responded to demands for increased rights and protections with revised statutes and amendments to the Constitution. Archival repositories in the United States range from large government institutions to small private collections, and from academic archives to repositories of business. These institutions collect, preserve, and make available the essential evidence of the story of the United States and its people. Without these repositories, it would be impossible to interpret the way our country has developed. The story of the United States continues, and archives are stewards of that story. And then it goes on to encourage folks to connect with those archives in your area. So this is kind of an outward-facing piece for statewide commissions and committees to remind them that archives are a very important piece of the public history interpretation. So I'll dive a little bit into what we're planning here in the state. We aim to have a multi-year commemoration, and we actually just kicked that off last weekend in Halifax for the annual Halifax Resolves Day. That's one of the dates on the flag, if you're new to the state. We hope to have a multi-year effort that will encourage North Carolinians to explore the rich history of our places and people and spaces from all 250 years of our history. We want to engage communities across the entire state, not just those places that had maybe a Revolutionary battle or a Revolutionary War hero that lived in their area. And to that point, we will also aim to explore that whole history with our commemoration, as I said. In addition to exploring Revolutionary NC, we have another thematic framework that we're working with in the department. It's called When Are We Us? And the US is capitalized. So that's supposed to mean us and the US. And that allows us to explore all those times in our history when we're living into the ideals of the revolution. So who are those voices and leaders and places that carry our stories of struggle, creation, and connection to one another? On our social media and online promotion of the commemoration, you're going to start seeing us use this phrase, many voices, one North Carolina, to kind of capture that spirit of When Are We Us? So the department itself will plan a robust series of programs, educational resources, and online assets through the commemoration. Highlights include my favorite. We're going to have a series of children's books. We'll have special traveling exhibits. The State Archives is doing some what we call one-day wonder exhibits, which use some original materials from our collections out in the state, as well as new historical waysides and numerous teacher educational resources. We're trying to foster committees in every county to lead their local efforts. And we're also launching a local grant program to support commemoration resources and programs at the local level. So if you have a nonprofit working with you, or you're part of a nonprofit, you are eligible to apply for a grant. So I encourage you to go to our website at america250.nc.gov. You'll see all that we're building there. We're continuing to add to that. You can link to all of our online resources. Like we've started to create print-on-demand exhibits. We have one up there about When Are We Us and archival records that relate to those themes. And you can also apply for a grant from there and learn more all about what we're doing. So how specifically is the State Archives plugging into this? We're creating educational programs, both virtual and on demand, highlighting research into those records related to those themes. We're welcoming students and teachers to learn more about how to connect primary resources to their studies. That included 55 middle schoolers on Monday, so I barely survived that foray of fun. We're developing these special exhibits, like I said, that will use our collections out in the state and highlighting the commemoration theme. And we're very excited. We're going to launch a program called Docs Boxes, which are primary source-based lesson plans related to our collection material that will be available to teachers for free during the commemoration. So all of our outreach programs, large and small, from our podcast team to our search room displays to our YouTube channel, is going to be devoted to highlighting the things that we have that will connect to the history and themes of the commemoration. So I encourage you to reach out to any other local cultural heritage organizations in your area to see if there's a possibility to partner with them or join in their resources for the commemoration. Invite teachers to learn more about your collections and how they can use them in the classroom. Maybe you want to host a program during the commemoration, or connect with a new group that may not be aware of your collections but would be interested to learn more. Use our America 250 resources. Like, that's why we're making the print on demand exhibits, so that you can print them yourself and use them as a backdrop for a program if you would like. But now is the time to highlight all that you do as shepherds of that documentary heritage that captures all of the American stories, large and small. So I really think this is a great opportunity. This is the opportunity of our generation to really connect public history in the archives to the public writ large, sort of like the bicentennial was 50 years ago. I will be around, so I'm happy to answer any questions. You can always reach out to me too via email. That's, like I said, what I do most of the day, all day, is think about America 250. So I'm happy to share with you ideas that other institutions are planning or thinking about, and maybe help connect you with someone that I've been talking to in your region as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Get my notes here. So this year's theme for the conference, as you well know, is looking back, looking forward, because it is our 40th anniversary. And later this afternoon, we'll hear a second plenary, a keynote address from Dr. Darren Waters about his archival journey. But now I would like to introduce some of the folks that have made SNCA a reality for the past 40 years. I'd like to welcome 4 past presidents of SNCA. We have Donna Kelly, who was the president of SNCA from 1990 to 1991. She's the Emerita Head of Special Collections here at the State Archives. Jason Tomberlin was the head of SNCA, president of SNCA from 2004 to 2005. He is the head of Research and Instructional Services and the interim curator of the North Carolina collection at Wilson Special Collections Library at UNC Chapel Hill. Rebecca, on the end, was SNCA president from 2017 to 2018. She is the Public Services Archivist at Wake Forest University. And finally, we have Don Lucas, who was the SNCA president from 2019 to 2020 and is the Technical Services Archivist for Collection Management at UNC Chapel Hill. Please join me in welcoming them. So before I get into their conversation with them, I wanted to briefly set the stage for where we were. And I can let you all see these and pass them around later. But this is the copy of the very first letter that ever mentioned something resembling SNCA. It was sent to Dr. Bill Price, and it was sent by the fine folks at ECU, Donald Lennon, Maurice York, and Morgan Barkley, on July 27th, 1983, congratulating Dr. Price for getting funding for the State Archives, additional funding. But then they say, we urge you and the Division of Archives and History to call for an organizational meeting in Raleigh of all persons professionally involved in archives and historical records administration. We strongly support the concept of an active state organization, and we feel that archivists and librarians across the state will benefit tremendously from this effort. Dr. Price responded and set up a steering committee of 30 people, including the State Records Advisory Board and other folks, that met in Raleigh on October 24th, 1983, which was when SNCA first got its nascent ideas. The very first SNCA meeting took place on March 9th, 1984 at the Carolina Inn in Chapel Hill. And their theme was the Carolina Charter that we have here at the State Archives, because it was a brand new organization. Registration was $15. So with inflation, I think ours is still reasonable today. And they only had 2 sessions in addition to the business meeting. Acquisitions policies for manuscript collections and arrangement, retrieval, and storage of photographs. Some things change, some things don't. So that was SNCA in 1984. And now let's hear about the times that these folks were involved with SNCA. We can start in chronological order. What stands out as your most memorable moment or achievement from your time or involvement with SNCA?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is we were trying to get nonprofit status, and it took us forever because this was, you got to remember, computers were like not used often. So, in very early stages, I remember getting a memory typewriter and I was so excited, but we had to fill out a lot of paperwork through the IRS and they turned us down. And so we had to think of different wording and trying to get it all together and finally we were able to get it passed. So I think that was probably the most important thing that I feel like happened during my tenure. So that's about it.
Jason?
And I promise you, Donna and I did not work on this together, but it's interesting you mentioned the IRS status. The 2 things I actually have as Josh said, the pleasure of working at Wilson Library. And I was like, wait a minute, we have all the newsletters and the journals and everything. Let me go back and read some of my presidential messages. The very first message I wrote, remember I was treasurer for a few years beforehand, was, isn't it a good idea to donate to SNCA? For all of these wonderful, the endowments and just give a gift that endures. So thank you. I didn't know the story of how long it took to get IRS 501c3 or whatever the qualification is. But that's the 2 things I remember is working on trying to increase endowments and trying to increase funding for SNCA, as well as the 20th anniversary that we held at Wilson Library. Forgotten about that. I'm getting old and forgetful, but that was fun to go back and read through that. And then also, I think one of our great accomplishments, I looked at the fall 2004 newsletter, and my presidential message was about Archives Week. During 2004, that was the first planning meeting led by Kathy Wisser. I had little to do other than to show up and to support her. Led by Kathy Wisser's efforts to set up Archives Week and to really promote Archives Week. And it's, really fulfilling to see that it's still going on and it's still active. So those are the 2 things that stuck out. I had to remind myself in the presidential messages during my time period.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Well, thank you. I'm Rebecca. I was president in 2016. I only remember that specifically is because I brought my 5-week-old to the
Thank you.
conference to run a business meeting with her on my chest. So I'm really excited to be here and back and in person. I have some things to unburden myself with really quickly. Yes, I do dress like Stephanie every day. Stephanie, you're a fearless leader. And no, I did not register for this conference, even though I was supposed to. Even though I'm on the planning committee, on a panel and moderating multiple sessions, I forgot to register. So sorry, Josh. No, I did not bring swag for the WFU sponsored table like I was supposed to. So if someone asked you from Wake Forest, say yes, you did get swag and it was wonderful. But the SNCA swag on the table has been in my office since 2018 and has now made it to an in-person conference. So I feel like that's a win. And then, yes, I did read through SNCA meeting minutes starting from 2013. The only thing apparently I prepared for this meeting was looking through that. So to answer your question, Josh, some of the things that I worked on, I was on the SNCA board for 8 years because once I was the president, every president-elect left the state. So I was the immediate past president for 3 or 4 years in a row. So one of the things we worked on was a plan for when we didn't have a president coming up. Some other things, we changed Archives Week to Archives Month, which I think was a great addition. We can celebrate the whole month of October. SNCA went fully online, which was great. This was not my doing. This was all the committees doing. And then the members at large, the student and the RAC representative was something that we wrote into our bylaws. And I think those are some of the things that I remember most from that time.
Thank you.
And seeing so many of you, it's exciting to be back in person and see so many people.
And Don, I think we might have an idea since you were president in 2020, but please tell us your most memorable moment.
Yeah, so I will start with saying that, so as president in 2019, 2020, so I was the vice president program chair the previous year. And we were scheduled to have that meeting at UNC Wilmington. And you might remember there was a little hurricane, Florence, that Wilmington was just inaccessible to the rest of the state for a little while. So there was a whole question of whether we could have the meeting at UNC Wilmington, and inevitably the answer was yes, and it was a great meeting. And then I thought, like, well, whew, we got through that. Nothing like that, nothing could be worse than that. And then we get to 2020. So I was president. I was not on the program committee. I really had nothing to do with planning this wonderful meeting that was supposed to be held in person at Elon University, March 18th through 20th, 2020. And it was going to be a joint meeting with the North Carolina Community College Archival Association. Everything was planned and good to go. And on March 5th, I contacted the executive board and said, maybe we should, do some contingency planning. Like, what if we have to cancel this meeting? How much money would we stand to lose? Could we possibly shift this to being an online meeting? And at the time, I think a lot of people on the executive board thought I had just lost my mind. What do you mean we're going to cancel a meeting? No, we can't do this online. So anyway, we had a lot of back and forth, and we were looking at what other organizations were doing. On March 9th, we learned that our keynote speaker, Dorothy Berry, would not be allowed to travel to North Carolina. So we were planning on still having an in-person meeting, but her keynote address would be online via Zoom or however it was going to happen. So at 12:14 p.m., this is important, on March 10th, we announced that the annual meeting was still scheduled as planned, with Dorothy Berry presenting remotely. We announced that there would be some extra health and safety measures in place, such as providing hand sanitizer and encouraging this thing called social distancing. And then at 1:05 p.m. on March 10th, I received, in response to that message I just sent out, a response from Jason, letting me know that Governor Cooper had just declared a state of emergency, and a growing number of institutions began prohibiting all non-essential travel. So therefore, on March 11th, we announced that the meeting, in-person meeting was canceled, and that we were discussing options for how to proceed. So what ended up happening was in May, I believe, we had a meeting online via Zoom. It was Dorothy Berry's keynote address. It was the annual business meeting, and then we just had a discussion session where people could talk about, this new work from home thing and what they were doing. And I think I was just like hosting the Zoom meeting from my account, and I really had no idea what I was doing, and I was so scared that like my internet would go out and mess up the whole meeting. But anyway, so that all happened. We pulled it off, although not the way it was originally planned and perhaps not ideal. We have until today done everything online since then. And I just want to say I'm so happy that I know it's hybrid. There are people online, and I think that's great that we are providing virtual access for people who can't be here in person. But I'm so glad to see everyone here in person today.
That's an astute point, because it is the first time since 2019 that we're all together again. So this is a big moment, finally, a long time coming. So all of you have been instrumental in SNCA being a part of this vibrant community of archivists in the state. What role do you think it has played? Like, has it evolved since your time, or what role do you think SNCA should play as part of the professional community? Let me start with Donna.
Well, early on, one of the main things that, as we've said before, was networking, and that was very beneficial in the early days. I think I graduated from Wake Forest in '84 and started working here, and so I obviously joined SNCA because that was what you did. And this is just a little aside. Because SNCA sounded like Snickers, we always had those little miniature Snickers bars at the registration tables. I remember that. And I thought, we should have had some. I should have told you we should have had some because I love Snickers bars.
My apologies.
But one of the important things I think we did back then was to host some of the SAA workshops. We would have like you did this time, some pre-conference workshops. They were very, very good. I don't remember specific ones, and we always tried to alternate the meetings, like in the western part of the state or the eastern part of the state, and then sometimes here. It was hard sometimes to plan around football games or spring breaks. We tried to plan them around the breaks if we were on a campus because parking would be so much easier and that type of thing. And I remember we did a print directory because it was helpful because, back then email was not prevalent. And so we had to have phone numbers or addresses to contact people. So we always kept that directory handy and tried to keep it updated every year. So I think we've come very far now with all of the things you can just email somebody. You don't have to bother them with a phone call or pay the cost of a stamp to mail something, snail mail. So that's one thing. And it's just so much better. I've been out of the field for a while. I started here in '84 and then I moved to publications in '96. So I was kind of out of the archival field for 16 years, but then I came back as head of special collections and retired in 2020. So I haven't been as involved. I still retain my membership just because that's what I started out as an archivist. And I always feel like that's helping me in my retirement years because I'm working part-time as contract editor with the Historical Review and also with the John Dickinson papers. And so I can read the old transcript, read the old handwriting, and that's what I had to do here to help patrons when I worked in the search room. So I know I'm getting off on a tangent talking about my personal stuff, but it's interesting. I think the archival field is very important even today, especially like Sarah said, during the 250th. The people can come here, and some people back then they didn't realize that they could come here and actually see the documents. They thought, oh, well, they're locked away somewhere. And, back then they could come and use them. And then now they're online, and that makes my job a lot easier when I'm working on something. I don't have to get out of my house. I can just look things up online. So I think that's been a major benefit, not necessarily just with SNCA, but with the archival field in general. So that's.
Thank you,
yeah.
Donna.
I'll second Donna on the sense of community that that I have been privileged to be a part of and that has assisted me in my career. So when I was an undergraduate at UNC, was a history major, I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I'm going to teach history and go coach baseball, which is what I thought my plan was. That's what my baseball coach in high school was, a history teacher. I was going to do that. Well, I was also broke, as many college students are. And so I went to a history club meeting at UNC, had never been to another history club meeting, but it was about careers in history. A former past president of SNCA, Ed Morris, was there, who worked in the State Archives for a long time and was at Wake Forest Birthplace Museum for years as well, was there to talk about careers in history and talked about work at the State Archives. And in passing, he said, by the way, we need help on the weekends. So if anybody wants to come try to get a job, I'm like, well, I'm broke and this sounds fun. I had no idea what an archives was. And so that kind of sense of starting to figure out what I was doing and what I wanted to do, and then when you talk to your family members and you're going to be an anarchist? You're going to be an architect? You know, and trying to explain, no, and but finding that community where people understood it when you said archivist, and then what you were wanting to do. And again, it's either Ed or Rusty Kuntz. I remember working part-time in the research room, put a membership application down in front of me for SNCA and said, here, make an investment in your future. You should join this group. And so that has been the biggest part is learning about those, finding those people, making those connections. Program committee, the sessions are wonderful, the training, the education, but it's the connections that I've made and just coming and talking and having coffee and going out to lunch and being on the board and going to, when Gwen Gosney Erickson was hosting us at Guilford College and going out to lunch, that's what's been really instrumental in getting to know people. And the directory, I remember the directory, I forgot about that, the paper directory, y'all. This is like a phone book. Just knowing those people and getting to know those and being able to have those conversations, that's been the most beneficial part. I will say one more quick thing. I wanted to get this in. We're up here to talk about our times as president. Younger people, if you're getting started, volunteer to be treasurer as well. No one wants to be treasurer. Believe me, no one ever wants to be treasurer, but man, is that a cool way to get to know names and people. You see those checks, you see those, well, now it's PayPal, but you see those PayPal payments, it's like, wait a minute, I don't know who this person is, where are they? And you get to know, and then you start making those connections and getting that. So I'm treasurer for another organization, and I've been treasurer for like a couple more as well, which sounds like I'm not embezzling, I promise you. I'm not even really good with numbers. I'm cheap, but I'm not good with numbers. But it's been that the treasurer role also, if you have an opportunity, that is a really neat way to get to know people and to get to know those names and make connections. Sorry, I just
And I
go
will
off on my
plug-
treasurer note for a minute. So.
And I will plug, if there's other, we just had elections, we'll announce those results during the business meeting. But if you're thinking about serving on SNCA and maybe treasurer isn't the role for you, although I would encourage you to do it, there are, of course, a lot of other roles and places where you could volunteer to be a part of SNCA committees and on the board. Rebecca.
It's hard to get out. Yes, I will continue beating that drum of especially young archivists or students. When I was president, I would go to different library schools to tell them about joining SNCA. It's so affordable. It's such an opportunity to network, as you said, to get those things on CVs. So when you are up for a job position, you've served with other people on SNCA, and they say, "Oh, you were on that committee with me." You rise to the top of a candidate pool if you have SNCA membership and service on your CV. So I tell all of my students, and we have a surprising amount of students who are going into library school, that getting involved in student organizations, you can get published with ease, maybe? You can get published. So I think SNCA is really just wonderful for that. And of course, networking, I've made dear friends in this group and my time on the board. And then two things off of your anecdotes. When we were planning the Greenville, North Carolina conference, we're planning them around spring breaks, as you said, because of parking. And someone tweeted, "How dare you, SNCA, plan a meeting during March Madness?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even, I'm not a basketball person. I didn't even." Yeah, it wasn't. I remember who it was. No, but I was like, oh my gosh, it didn't even occur. There's so many things. So passionate in North Carolina. And then also when I was I many times just tell people I'm a librarian because it's easier than explaining archivist. But I was at the doctor and I said, I'm an archivist. And she took a beat and then she goes, so what does an alchemist do? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, okay.
Yeah, when I told my parents I was going to be working in special collections, and they thought I was some fancy bill collector. But I'm going to echo a lot of what's already been said. So SNCA is for North Carolinians, composed of North Carolinians, with the exception of a couple meetings held with other state organizations. All of the annual meetings have been in North Carolina. The members are from North Carolina. The people on the committees, on the executive board, are from North Carolina. And it really is a great way to get, for professional development, for networking. You could go to conferences for other organizations, like I know some people go to SAA. I go to SAA, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about SAA, but SAA is far away usually, like no closer to here than DC, and expensive. And SNCA is, like I said, almost always in the state. I know it's a big state. Sometimes travel is hard, but it's in the state. And the executive board and the committees have really worked to keep it an affordable conference. So Donna mentioned, or someone mentioned, the first meeting registration was $15. So it's a little, it's more than that now, but it is still very affordable when compared to a lot of other conferences. We don't have these conferences at like the fancy hotels because that would be expensive, and we have tried to keep this affordable to everyone regardless of how much institutional support you have. So yeah, I'm, as I said before, I'm so glad to see everyone here. I will echo, please, I am chair of the nominating committee right now. Volunteer, even if you don't want to be on the executive board, there is still, there are plenty of committee opportunities for everyone. And I got involved with SNCA as a grad student. I served on a committee and then became the secretary on the executive board. And the networking opportunities have just been amazing for me, and as you've heard, for other people as well.
So we'll have our last question for the panel, and then if we have any time, we'll open it up to the floor. What do you think has been the biggest change in the archival field, either since your time as SNCA president or since you entered the profession?
Well, I touched on it a little bit. You know, everything is done electronically, and the internet is widely available. Another thing, this is going to sound crazy, but in the early days, we were really worried if we started putting everything online, because that would mean our numbers would be down in the search room, and that was just going to be terrible. But you know, now it's like, oh my gosh, everybody expects things to be online, and everybody, all the institutions in this room are doing a great job of making documents accessible. And so I think that's one of the big things, you know, just reaching out. Like Sarah was saying earlier, you know, you need to reach out to the community around you and foster support for your organization and prove that, you know, you need funding, you like applying for grants and things like that. But that's about it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think my job is just to copy Donna up here, I'm sorry. But thank you, but you get good ideas started. I guess, gosh, it was late 90s. Digitization, it's just been, I mean, I think I know what it was in the late 90s that did exist, early 2000s, and just the changes over that time period and the way in which I was correspondence archivist here for several years at the State Archives, and answering questions, and was just remember standing at the copy machine. Copy, paper copies. And it's just the way in which we share resources. We make resources available online now. We digitize and get it out there. So I don't know that that's a wonderful answer to your question, but that's all I can think of over the last, oh gosh, it's almost 30 years now. Wow, I'm getting old. But just the world of digitization has been unbelievable. A change that you think you understand coming and see coming, but things that you really couldn't foresee happening, and the possibilities that are there as well. I do remember, and it seems like the pendulum is swinging a little bit, it was just like, digitize it. Storage is cheap, just digitize it all. And now we seem to kind of swing back, and it's like, wait a minute, storage is not so cheap, and you gotta be able to find it if you're digitizing this much stuff. So it's kind of interesting to watch those trends as they go through.
I think maybe the fact that it hasn't changed that much is the most surprising, that, you know, past is prologue. We are so necessary now more than ever to capture what is born digital and what is more ephemeral and what is seemingly unimportant, but as strides in history or research, all of that change, and then they're saying, you know, we found something in the archives. Well, of course, we put it there for a reason. So I think that just, we say it all the time of like job security of importance, not that we're getting paid for that importance, but just knowing that these records are for the future and that we are the stewards of those and have been, since the beginning of this, is just not a change, but just the lasting impact and importance that we have.
So I'm going to bring this back around to SNCA. So when I first joined SNCA, SNCA had a website, SNCA had a listserv. You can make payments via PayPal, but so much was on paper and in person. So like when I was secretary, one of my jobs was getting together all the conference information and getting it printed out and sent out to everyone in the mail. That directory that I think Donna mentioned, that was paper. We sent that out in the mail. There was just, it was still very paper-based. And in person, in addition to the meetings, the annual meetings, like we're having now being in person, the committee meetings were in person. So if you were on a committee, we didn't do Zoom, and so you got in a car and drove to wherever in the state that meeting was, and it might not be anywhere close to where you live. So I remember like parking my car in the Harris Teeter parking lot at Chapel Hill and getting in the car with like Jason and some other people to go wherever we were going for a committee meeting. And so you got to travel around and see the state, talk to people in the car, have arguments about where you were stopping for lunch.
Go ahead. I know what you want to say.
Yes. So Jason always wanted to go to the Bojangles.
Yes.
And I did not. So that's just something very different now, where now you're like, oh, of course, we'll just do this meeting on Zoom because it's very impractical to get everyone together in person.
There's less chicken on Zoom. But,
That's true.
so Aaron, if you wouldn't mind coming down to the microphone. So if anyone has questions for this illustrious panel of presidents, please raise your hand and Aaron will come find you with the microphone. We've got a little less than 10 minutes, so please feel free to, this is a unique opportunity to pick the brain of 4 past leaders of SNCA about their memories or any other interesting questions, so please feel free to ask whatever you'd like. Or not. We have a question. Anyone's welcome to take it. Yes, sorry. The question was, we talked about the changes that have happened in the past, but what changes are we looking forward to or perhaps hesitant about in the archival field going forward?
Something that we are working on and excited about, I have an excited and scared of answer, is we're using From the Page for transcription, manuscript transcription, which is very exciting, community-driven, or we have a very enthusiastic woman in England who is transcribing our Board of Trustees minutes, and she absolutely loves it. So it's exciting to have, and this is nothing new of that, but just people being involved in archives and getting involved in that in some way beyond archivists, beyond our field, that I think is really cool. And as our students at Wake don't necessarily can't read manuscripts, it's nice to know that there are people who are enthusiastic about that. Not scared of, that's not your question, so, but just capacity and volume and expectations and, why isn't this online? As we know, we can't just digitize it and throw it online. There's so much more work, and the education of letting people, the powers that be, or just the general public understand how much work that is, and the capacity of you know, one person lone archivist or a team of many archivists. There's just the capacity of that, and the records never stop, and the electronic records are even faster coming in. So there's great things, and then there's just, you know, that importance. We know it's important and people think it's important, but then where does it fall on the budget and priority list is certainly not a new thing, but continues to be part of the archives world.
I'll add, I've got a colleague from Technical Services at UNC sitting beside me, and I know at least one in the crowd. One thing I'm excited about is and I'm trying to think of the right word, it's not recreation, and it's not a rereading or reinterpretation, but it's a looking at description again, to be able to take description that was written in a certain time period and was done well, but was not done to tell the stories of everybody that shows in the archival record. And I'm not saying this very well. I don't feel the words flowing out of my mouth very well right now, but that is exciting to be able to tell those different stories and to kind of highlight those places to look. I guess my scared part of it is back to the capacity questions. Like, there's so much to do that to, and so much that's still coming in. And it's like, how do you manage that when you're not getting new positions? That funding is not increasing, but how do you keep kind of pushing that story? Sarah mentioned it with America's 250th, to be able to tell those stories that are not the stories that are necessarily on the older highway historical markers. Is that the new highway historical markers are showing some of these things and resources for minority communities that didn't have a voice and weren't a part of that story in the late 19th and early 20th century. So I don't know that I said that very well, but that's an exciting thing. We're overwhelmed at UNC with individuals looking into plantation records and looking for stories and families. And it's just that it's exciting, the work that they're doing to be able to tell those stories. And it's not perfect, right? It's like we're getting it just to enough so that you have to come in and look at it or ask us for copies. But that's also, I guess, the point about capacity as well. So.
And I will chime in, there are several sessions today and tomorrow to this question about describing to get new populations. We have documenting student populations later today. We have a session tomorrow morning looking at the redescription project of the treasurers and comptrollers papers here in the state archives that speak exactly to what you were talking about.
One of the things that scares me is they're not teaching you how to read cursive anymore in schools. So, yeah, I mean, that really, well, I guess it's job security for the old people like me who can still read them, but that's scary. And I know Colin runs into this. Since I was head of special collections, some people want to buy or sell the manuscripts instead of donating them to the repositories. That's always been it's just something that just, it makes me so mad when I see something on Antiques Roadshow and I'm just like, why don't you donate that rather than try to see how much it's worth? So that's a scary thing too. So.
Donna took my answer with the cursive handwriting, but that is now, if we're hiring students, we will ask if they know how to read cursive. So that is, I think, going to be a more niche skill set for people in the future.
Perhaps there's a plan at some point for some sort of special cursive bee. But on that note, I'd like you to join me in thanking these past SNCA presidents for their service and for joining us here today.